Hello, thank you for joining Heartland Forward today for our Secret Sauce series. The secret sauce, those ingredients and playbook that makes a community great and allows for communities to thrive. As a convener of people in a forum for actionable discussions, Heartland Forward will host dynamic, thoughtful conversations during the series. Our conversation today will be centered on Tulsa, Oklahoma, through the lens of community building and economic development. The goal of our conversation is twofold: to build community pride by celebrating the secret sauce ingredients that make Tulsa a great city and vital asset to the U.S. heartland, to increase awareness of Tulsa of those looking to relocate to the middle of the country for other communities to learn from Tulsa and to put these ideas into action that could be beneficial to their communities. Before we get started with our conversations with Mayor Bynum and Rose Washington, we're going to show you a sneak peek of Tulsa's secret sauce through this video.
I would describe Tulsa as a piece of very fine, very, very fine art.
Tulsa is a wonderful big little city.
About 1 million people in the MSA, growing, diverse, interesting, has a storied background.
It's one of those things, you look at it for the first time, you experience it, you take it in, and you might not know exactly what to think about it. And then the more you figure out what it is specifically about it that you enjoy, it really becomes a place that you see yourself in.
It's a place for families, for young professionals, for business leaders, for small business owners.
Tulsa is a city that really has high expectations of itself.
There's something really special about Tulsans.
Everyone is so friendly. We hear this all the time from our new members. People are coming here, they feel welcomed, they're engaged, they're wanting to dig in.
I feel a sense of camaraderie. I feel a sense of commitment to community. I feel a sense of commitment to economic development.
I think what's really special about Tulsa right now is that we're trying to build the next 100 years here while hanging on to the things that are core to us and to our identity and not losing sight of those things as we grow.
If we can just get people to visit Tulsa, we get them here almost every time. Once people get on the ground here and they see the quality of life here, they see the opportunities that are here, we have a real chance to keep them here.
Tulsa's a great backdrop. It has a robust and burgeoning arts district. We have the culinary scene with 2 James Beard award-winning chefs last year alone. The hidden gem of Tulsa has to be Gathering Place. It's something you have to experience in person to believe. Over 100 acres.
Right on the shore of the Arkansas River, the greatest public park gift ever given to a city in the history of the United States.
Nearly $500 million of investment in Gathering Place formed a one-stop destination for all ages, all backgrounds, all talents. It's an incredible place.
One of the best changes that we've seen in the city of Tulsa really over the last decade is the importance of placemaking. I think the first hallmark of that was the Gathering Place.
Every bit of it is special and truly first class.
In my mind, the secret sauce of Tulsa is that everyone seems to be headed in the same direction.
What we have figured out in Tulsa is that we're better together. We've got to collaborate to make change happen.
Everybody's rowing in the same direction right now.
We have representation at every level, from the board level all the way down, thinking about our nonprofit to our corporate sector, as well as our civic leadership.
I think there's no better picture of that right now in our city than the way we're tackling economic development through technology. That we're gonna invest in the talent, the infrastructure, the resources, the companies that are putting technology first, because we know that that's what's going to help our economy and our infrastructure and our art and our culture here exist over generations to come. One of the key ingredients to that success is gonna be talent. And Tulsa, over the last couple of years, has invested in talent in a number of different ways. One of those is Tulsa Remote, where we're bringing people to town.
There are growing industries such as cybersecurity, data analytics, virtual health, energy innovation, and unmanned aerial aviation, all happening in Tulsa, is a surprise to many. And so how can we lift those narratives up and make sure that people understand the opportunity and innovation is here?
I think entrepreneurship is in our blood. From the Creek tribe that first existed on this land, that were entrepreneurial and knew how to trade and knew how to make the land work for them, to the initial settlers who moved here, who landed at the bend in the Arkansas River because that's where you could get cattle to cross, to the early oil tycoons who saw an opportunity to build a whole city and drove and created this entire economy. What does the fourth or fifth iteration of that look like that's technology driven?
So Tulsa, like so many communities, has a storied past. Obviously, this year is significant in Tulsa's history because it's the 100th anniversary of the race massacre, and it has received a ton of attention for that. I think one thing that has been really impactful and powerful about this year in Tulsa has been the fact that the community has really taken the time to grapple and understand what happened, and also start some of those really important conversations about what is Tulsa's next centennial going to look like.
Finally, I think this generation of Tulsans are saying, we're not going to be a better city unless we talk about issues of race in Tulsa, unless we talk about issues of inequality in Tulsa. And so I think that is the secret sauce for us, is everybody is aiming high and expecting more from our community.
You just see this really underpinning of culture that's really the foundation for everything that's happening here in Tulsa. We just have so much art, so much culture that is just bursting from the scene.
Last year, we did a survey of over 2,000 recent college graduates, and it showed that over 2/3 of them had no preconception of Tulsa. That's an opportunity. So we are looking at that as an ability to tell a different story. Tulsa's best days are not behind it, but in fact ahead of it.
If you want to help shape the future of a great American city, you can do that right now.
One of the things I often hear, whether that's in media or in just casual conversation, is that you have to get to coastal cities in order to make a difference in the country, and that's just not true. There's so much happening here in the Heartland where you get involved in local elections, you get involved in local initiatives, you get involved in what it means to be building community from the ground up, and all of a sudden you see that you've actually had a hand in truly pushing a community forward, and all of that talent is here, and really looking forward to working together.
Our focus is on being a world-class city, not just better than the next town over.
I believe Tulsa's secret sauce is really the fact that it's the hidden gem in the Heartland. Tulsa's backdrop of over 1 million people in the MSA, paired with the fact that you can buy a home for less than $200,000, and on day one, volunteer or serve on a nonprofit board, those are really incredible ingredients.
Tulsa truly is a wonderful place, and that big little city comes to life and is alive and a great place for all.
Tulsa is truly doing great things. I'm thrilled to introduce Mayor G.T. Bynum and Rose Washington, Chief Executive Officer of Tulsa Economic Development Corporation. Rose, at TEDC, you enlighten people, enable small businesses, and help develop communities in partnership with a variety of different stakeholders. You are also a highly regarded partner in many economic development initiatives, with broad experience creating strategic alliances in diverse communities, and you are the current chair of the Tulsa Regional Chamber of Commerce. I also love that you moved from Southern California to the Heartland and to my home state, Oklahoma. And Mayor Bynum, thank you also for joining us. With a city workforce of 4,000 employees, of a metro area of over 1 million people, Tulsa, Oklahoma is a place where past, present, and future converge in a 21st century city. It is important to you, inclusive, sustainable growth is driving the community forward, and Tulsa is known for being a great place to be. Your leadership and your community partners are growing your economy in innovative ways, supporting tech, entrepreneurship, cybersecurity, aircraft, and the quality of life with arts and culture, and the Gathering Place being named one of the world's greatest places. You have also worked diligently to revitalize Greenwood Historic District while shining a light on the tragedy of the Tulsa Race Massacre and the rich history of Black Wall Street. Mayor Bynum, you truly do have a big job and are leading with great partners in the city of Tulsa. It shows that your Tulsa family roots run deep, and I love that you've also decided to raise your family in Tulsa. And Mayor Bynum and Rose, thank you again for joining us. There's so many great things happening in Tulsa, as I mentioned earlier, and we saw in the video. And your passion for Tulsa is clearly reflected in the work that you do daily. You're passionate about finding common ground to affect meaningful, sustainable change. So let's get started and hear from you, if that's okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Mayor, I'll start with you. You shared some of this in the video, but what do you think truly is the secret sauce that makes Tulsa thrive? In other words, what sets Tulsa apart, and why is this a great place to live?
Well, I really think that the competitive advantage that we've identified through a lot of hard-earned wisdom over the years is that we enjoy a quality of life here in Tulsa that you would normally have to go to a much larger city to enjoy. As you mentioned a moment ago, the greatest park gift given to any city in American history. Our concert arena has been the arena of the year 2 of the last 5 years, losing out to Madison Square Garden and the Staples Center. Like, that's the level of competition that we have. We have the greatest collection of American art and history in the United States that isn't owned by the federal government. We have all these great amenities and quality aspects of our quality of life here in Tulsa that you usually have to go to a much larger city to enjoy. But when you go to those larger cities, you run into much higher costs of doing business. And so we have this great gap that Tulsa is able to fill with low costs of doing business and very high quality of life. And that has not occurred by accident. And I think I'm sure we'll get into it a bit more today, but that is the result of decades of Tulsans investing in themselves and in our community.
Yeah, and I think you hit it. I mean, it's a great place to be. People are coming to live there. It's an easy and great place to live. Rose, what is something, though, that, building upon what the mayor just said, that's unique about Tulsa that we may be surprised to learn?
Well, I think one of the things that you'd be surprised to learn is that Tulsa is becoming a movie mecca. We're one of the top 10 places for the film industry when looking for smaller cities to film. So we're really growing in that space. And it's interesting to me, moving from Southern California, really being in the heart of Hollywood and seeing movie shoots here and there and everywhere. Now we're feeling that here in Tulsa. The other thing I think you'd be surprised to know about, and I'm going to plant a seed here, is that we truly are the center of the universe. And there is a special place here for anyone who's watching and listening that requires a visit to Tulsa. And you'll learn more about that when you're here.
Yeah, you've definitely used the assets that you've had over the years and introduced some new things that have truly created the secret sauce for Tulsa. And over the past couple of years, it's been a powerful reminder that Heartland communities are full of pragmatic, resilient problem solvers. We heard from other dynamic leaders in the video at the beginning of this program. Rose, what are those individuals and their organizations doing to provide inclusive, bottom-up solutions to recent challenges in Tulsa?
So I think, first of all, Tulsa is really a place where everyone has a role to play and everyone is welcomed. And so we have accepted our differences, we've embraced what's unique about us, and we've agreed to come together for the common good to find a way to really capitalize on all of the goodness of Tulsa. And so having meaningful conversations and getting people together to talk honestly about how we feel and what we think should be next for Tulsa has been really, really important. Bringing people from all facets of life, from the community, from the private sector, from government, the nonprofit organizations that play a big role in Tulsa. all coming together to work toward common goals and common outcomes, really to create what I call equitable prosperity for all. And so we are working from the bottom up, starting with people and the value that each of us really bring to the table to build a better Tulsa.
And Mayor, you've done a great job leading and bringing people together in the community. You listed some of those statistics about, what the quality of life is like, how you compare to other big cities. But where is your focus right now? And how do you see Tulsa utilizing its resources to further solve problems and make key investments as you grow for the future?
Well, one of the main reasons that I ran for mayor is that I love the history of our city. I love looking back at times, when Tulsans didn't like the taste of the water in our river here. And so they built one of the great marvels of civil engineering, the water line that is still our water source today. That was such a big deal that the President of the United States came here to open it. Or people that built one of the first airports in the world when most people had never seen an airplane. And a frustration for me was I spent almost a decade on our city council before running for mayor. And I constantly heard people in City Hall talking about competing with suburban communities for shopping centers. And I thought, boy, this is the kind of stuff my kids are going to read about when they grow up, is the big fight over who got the outlet mall. When you look around the world, the cities that are growing the fastest, that are achieving the most from an economic growth standpoint and having the best attainments in health outcomes and education, they're not cities fighting with their suburbs for retail growth. They are regions working together to compete globally. And so we really flipped the switch here in the last 5 years to elevate our expectations. I'm a big believer that a city can't achieve great things if you're not trying to achieve great things. They do not happen by accident. And so we have focused on trying to make Tulsa a globally competitive city and have had great results from an economic growth standpoint with that kind of a focus. But one of the early areas that we identified that was really hindering our ability to speed economic growth and allow people to invest in our city at a pace at which they would have confidence was that we had half a dozen different city authorities that would manage economic development projects, all with their own boards of directors, their own staff, none of whom necessarily knew what one another were working on. And so this year, we consolidated all of those authorities into a new one called the Tulsa Authority for Economic Opportunity. And the idea behind this is to take all of these assets that the city has, which is hundreds of millions of dollars in physical assets, not to mention the abilities that we have from an incentive standpoint, put them under one roof. And the purpose of this new organization is not economic development for its own sake. It's not just so the mayor, whoever it happens to be in the future, can make some job announcement. The purpose of it is to create equality of opportunity in Tulsa. When we look at our history as a city, we see that the moments when Tulsa has grown the most and had the most vibrant economy is when people viewed this as a city of opportunity for them. For most of us, that's what brought our families here in the first place. And so we want to make sure that it is a city of opportunity for everyone moving forward, that every kid that's growing up in this city has an equal shot at a great life. And we think that economic growth and investment is one of the best tools we have to help make that happen. And so this is one area where people put their parochial concerns aside and their need to control a specific board here or there, and instead brought them together, focused on the greater good for our community, and created an authority that really is first of its kind here in the United States. And that is quintessentially Tulsa, setting high expectations and finding a way to work together.
Mayor, that's a great example. And, part of us sharing through the Secret Sauce series is talking about communities that are utilizing their assets, the playbook that works well. And we know all communities are a little bit different, but I think what you mentioned in creating that authority is a great best practice for other communities within the Heartland to think about. And so, Rose, I'd love to hear from you because we hear many times that, sometimes it's hard, to not have a streamlined process. People want to engage in, the economic success of the community, but they don't know how. Talk to us a little bit about how, in the seat you sit in, both leading entrepreneurship opportunities and development, but also as the chair of the Tulsa Regional Chamber, how has that helped, and how is that advancing some of the things that you're doing?
So I think that one of the beautiful things about Tulsa is that anyone who wants to be a part of the change is welcomed to be a part of the change, no matter where you're from, where you live, what your skill set is. If you want to be a part of the change that's happening in Tulsa, we welcome you. I'll tell you that just a few days ago, I was at a TIPROS event with about 100 young professionals in the community, and that is an auxiliary of the Tulsa Chamber. And about 20% of the young folks were not from Tulsa, but they were all there learning and figuring out how to invest, how to lead, how to make change happen. And I just think the chamber is a great leader in this. Obviously, the mayor and his economic development team play a big part in this. Every organization has value and brings that value to the table here in Tulsa. And so we're able to really collaborate, really capitalize on the different assets that we all have. And again, everyone is invited to participate. And we've done a really good job of coming together and realizing that we truly are better together. We collaborate well when we collaborate well, and when we combine our resources to make big change happen.
I want to say, you mentioned TIPROS. That's probably another great best practice that I think many communities have learned from you of how do you recruit, retain young talent. So I want to move to sort of the talent piece. And as we know, the pandemic has really, changed the way in which we all work. A lot of people are still working remotely, and they're working from different areas of the country. We're seeing people move from the coast to the middle of the country. But Tulsa was doing some things before the pandemic hit around this. Mayor, can you talk a little bit about the Tulsa Remote Program, how it's working, how you're growing it, and what it's meant to your community, and how you continue to attract and retain talent?
Well, we are really fortunate here in Tulsa in that a lot of the people, it's kind of part of the culture here. People who have been successful in business here because they are innovative and forward-thinking have used that success to move into the philanthropic space. And certainly George Kaiser, one of the great entrepreneurs in the history of our city, creating the George Kaiser Family Foundation, which is a really forward-thinking organization. And they had this idea a couple years ago, before the pandemic really pressed remote work into the daily lives of so many people around the country, recognizing that we have spent now in Tulsa about 2 decades of unprecedented investment in placemaking and community development, making Tulsa the kind of place that is as appealing as it can be for the people who live here and for businesses who might be thinking about relocating here for their employees. But the challenge we faced is, around the country, a lot of that game historically, if you're trying to bring an entire company to town, really gets into a bidding war between deal closing funds. And that is something that we just endemically have never supported here locally. We don't want a company to come here just because we paid them the most to come here. But what the folks at Tulsa Remote, this new organization, realize is that a lot of employees in these large organizations that are able to work remotely, they would love the quality of life here that we were talking about a moment ago. They'd love the affordability that comes with the low cost of doing business. And so if you can be getting paid what you would be getting paid at a large company in a coastal city, but have the affordability and the quality of life that comes with living in Tulsa, that gives us a tremendous advantage. And so they created the Tulsa Remote Program And it got a lot of media attention because they were offering to pay $10,000 to people to relocate here. Really, though, what we found from it was that we didn't end up with a bunch of mercenaries coming to Tulsa, because the acceptance rate into that program, it's more selective than an Ivy League college. And in fact, the only people who really make it through to the end and get selected for this are people who really have a commitment to making a difference in the community where they live. And as Rose mentioned a moment ago, that's one of the great assets that we have here in Tulsa, and especially for young professionals, is this is not a community where you've got to wait 30 years to climb your way up the ladder before anybody cares what you think. Between the time that my wife and I moved home and I was elected mayor of Tulsa, it was less than 10 years. The average young professional in Tulsa has more of an ability to shape the future of our city right now than a billionaire philanthropist in a lot of cities around America would love to have. And so this Tulsa Remote program, we were very fortunate that they were ahead of the curve in seeing the value that remote work would have, and realizing that this was an unmet need, and it's something that cities here in the heartland that have that high quality of life and affordability of that high quality of life could really capitalize on. And it's been a great success for us here in Tulsa.
That's great. And I think it's becoming a trend. I'm going to say it again. I think it created a best practice. Where I'm sitting today in Northwest Arkansas, we have created a similar program called LifeWorks here. Other communities have followed, Topeka, Kansas, and many others. So again, it's just another reason of what is that secret sauce and playbook. And many of these things work across the heartland. And you made it unique to Tulsa. Northwest Arkansas made their program unique to Northwest Arkansas, and so on. I want to shift a little bit now. We saw it in the video, and it is a conversation that actually Tulsa was recognized nationally about, the history of Tulsa. We've talked today about sort of the forward thinking and what's exciting and what's ahead, but we can't lose sight on communities of knowing and understanding the history. So, Rose, can you share with us sort of what that's meant for the community and where you're going and how it's brought the community together, to share a little bit more about the history and where you're headed?
So I will tell you that my children are actually the grandchildren of a race massacre survivor, the great-grandchildren of a race massacre survivor. So when I came to Tulsa 20 years ago, I knew about the race massacre of 1921. And honestly, I didn't realize that most Tulsans didn't know until we started preparing for the commemoration. And so it is a secret that is no longer a secret. Now the world knows. And I think it has been an opportunity for Tulsa really to come together as a bigger family. Families have issues. Sometimes family members keep secrets. And now we've been able to uncover the past, to talk about it, to try to repair and try to move forward really together, not one group telling another or dictating to another what needs to be done to make change happen, but all of us having conversations. And so my work here at TEDC in Tulsa has always been about building equitable prosperity, but using the power of small business to affect that change. And of course, we do that by providing progressive lending to promising businesses. And so small businesses for me, and that segment of our economy has always been a way for me to work toward building prosperity, equal prosperity, building equitable opportunity, and really overcoming some of the disparities that have existed here.
I applaud you and the mayor and all the other leaders and community residents that shared those stories and brought it forward. And Tulsa has there's many reasons to go visit Tulsa, but if you're in Tulsa, you definitely need to go learn and see that. You also have to see the Gathering Place, which is an amazing space. Mayor, can you talk a little bit about, obviously the Gathering Place was a great investment, and it got, global credibility. But talk about, why the Gathering Place, and then what are you thinking about, how do you get future investment from outside investors coming into Tulsa? That's something that's really important in Heartland communities is investment can happen in the middle of the country. So we've seen that. You're in Tulsa, you're doing those things. So can you touch on a few of those items?
Oh, sure. And we're very proud at the Gathering Place. As you mentioned earlier, it's pretty much been rated by every national publication as one of the most important things for people to see in America at this point. It's the greatest park gift ever given to an American city. But I think it's so important for folks to understand that for us, the Gathering Place, the value of it is not having a trophy park in Tulsa. I mean, is it a trophy park? Yeah, we're very proud of it. But why it's important is really the motive behind it. And the motive behind it is really rooted in an understanding of what's happening in America and around the world right now, which is kind of the diminution of those things which we traditionally and historically relied upon to create community. It's never been easier to only get your news from people who tell you what you want to hear and not run into people at the store anymore and get feedback on social media that is only an echo chamber of what you already think. Church attendance nationwide is down. Civic association attendance nationwide is down. So all these things that in the first several centuries of our country, people relied upon to expose them to differing points of view and remind themselves of our shared humanity are on the wane. And we can either just say, well, gosh, it sure is bad that we're just going to be more isolated and paranoid in the future, or we can think about what those things are that we can build community around moving forward. And for us, the Gathering Place, it's an extraordinary experience that brings people from all parts of our city together, regardless of who they voted for president, regardless of what part of town they live in or what job their parents had or what country they were born in. Instead, everybody congregates in this one place and just has this amazing experience as Tulsans. And so for us, we're trying to find more ways to invest in ourselves. We're going through right now the largest capital improvements program in the history of the city aimed at quality of life. It's called Vision Tulsa. It's everything from building a lake in the Arkansas River to building a new museum at Gilcrease Museum, the greatest collection of American art and history in the country. We're trying to find more ways to build community around these public places that draw people together. And of course, there in Bentonville, you've pretty much got the gold standard for the country in Crystal Bridges.
Mayor and Rose, this has been such a great conversation. Unfortunately, we're getting close on time. We've talked a lot about exactly why we wanted to share the secret sauce of Tulsa. Many great practices are being implemented that you've already done, but I'd love to hear sort of what are some of your closing thoughts when you think about who's listening today. Mayor, it'll be some of your peers and mayors across the Heartland, Rose, other individuals that do what you do from a chamber perspective, leading communities around investing and entrepreneurship. So a few final last thoughts. And Rose, I'll start with you.
So I think I'd like to encourage everyone to accept the fact that we all have our own assets, our own special resources, our own special sauce. And no city is perfect, no community is perfect, but one thing we all have to do is to work together for the common good and to really affect change. And we never ever reach that destination where all is perfect and our cities and our communities are just where they need to be for the rest of time. As soon as we rest on our laurels, we find ourselves falling behind. And so we've got to continue to innovate. We have to continue to dream and collaborate and look forward to the future and build the kind of of city and the kind of communities that we really want our children to grow up in and want to remain a part of once they become adults.
Great advice and comments. Mayor, how about you?
I'd just say I'm so grateful for the work being done at Heartland Forward. You know, as you mentioned earlier, my grandfather was the mayor of Tulsa back when I was born, and that's him there over my shoulder. And I asked him one time, you know, when you were mayor, where did you go to get great ideas? And he said, we had one conference once a year, and that's all we did. And now I have just this embarrassment of riches to rely upon best practices and great ideas to steal from other cities and bring them here to Tulsa. And the most exciting work that's happening in cities and in civic innovation right now, and I think in economic development, is happening here in the center of the country. And it's because, you know, we don't get to rely on old legacies like some of our colleagues on the coast get to and truly coast on those. We've got to be scrappy and innovative here to be nationally competitive. And the cities that I admire the most, that are doing the most exciting things, are right here in the middle of the country. And so I'm just so grateful for the team at Heartland Forward for elevating that work and making it more accessible for all of us. Because every community benefits from having access to these best practices and these kinds of ideas.
Well, thanks, Mayor, for the comments. And I share in the background of growing up being the daughter of a mayor in a community. So you're closest to your constituents and trying to lead. And at Heartland Forward, we're just honored and privileged to work alongside leaders like you and like Rose. And thank you so much. This has been such a great discussion. We look forward to continued conversations. And at Heartland Forward, our mission really is to help change the narrative about the middle of the country and kickstart economic growth. So, as I mentioned, Tulsa is the first of our Secret Sauce series. Stay tuned for additional conversations we will be highlighting soon at Birmingham, Alabama, and Northwest Arkansas. So, Mayor Bynum and Rose, thank you for your time, and definitely look forward to being in touch.
Thank you.
Angie, thank you, and thanks for shining a bright light on Tulsa.